All right, so today I'm going to show you guys how with just a simple Node.js server and a Twilio Flex function, you can add uh, email functionality to Twilio Flex. So to start with, I just want to go over a little bit about what the Node server does, and then I'll go over a little bit about how the plugin code works as well. Once we have all that, I'll give you guys a full demo of how to both receive and send email from Twilio Flex. All right, so let's get started. First things first, let's take a quick peek at our mail server. So this particular server is using Node Mailer to listen to SMTP connections and parse them, and then take the data from that email and use it to create a task in Twilio. We do that by using Twilio's SDK, their library out on NPM, to connect to Twilio's task router inside of our workspace, and then we create the task. One thing to note about creating tasks with Twilio is that when you set attributes for a task that are custom, they need to be stringified JSON objects. They can't be an actual JSON object itself. So keep this in mind when you someday if you need to read data, you'll need to parse that data in order to manipulate it properly. And then of course, if you want to update that task with the changes that you've made, you need to stringify the data after you've parsed it. So just something to keep in mind when working with tasks inside of Twilio. Also, there is a task size attribute or an attribute limit to tasks. So if you exceed that size, the task won't be created. This error handler right here should show you that what size of task you tried to create, and it'll also give you the warning from Twilio which tells you what the maximum size of attributes they accept is. So going back to our server, we talked about how to handle incoming mail. So now let's talk about how we're going to send mail. For this particular server, I've used SendGrid. So we're going to create a simple Express server that operates on port 443 because obviously Flex runs on HTTPS. We want our server to work on HTTPS as well. So I've got a simple route here that will just respond with a little, hey, I'm here, I'm working, just so that we know that the server's running. And then we're going to use SendGrid, which is one of our other files, to actually do our API calls. So we're using Let's Encrypt to provide us with encryption in HTTPS. You can use this yourself just by generating certs for your domain and then pointing the files at where they're located on your server. And then we just simply listen to that port. So via this route right here in Express, we're going to go over to SendGrid now. So with the SendGrid file, we're doing two things. First and foremost, we're doing some authorization, which I'll talk about a little bit right now. So we want our server to make sure that the user that's calling our API is someone that we can trust. We don't want to just allow any person to call our send API and send email through SendGrid. So we do this by using what's called a JSON Web Token, or a JWT, from Twilio. We'll have Twilio send that token to us so that we can verify and validate that token. Then we'll call Twilio's IAM accounts API with that token and ask them to validate it for us. And we'll be using our account SID or our auth tokens. And then if it's valid, we'll allow our Express to go on to the next thing. So this auth is really just a middleware that we're using to validate that our users are authenticated. And then last but not least, we create our API for the SendGrid call. So this is just a post request that we'll accept. We make sure that the user is authenticated with the middleware here. And then we go through and we say, hey, the information that we really need is who's this going to, who's it coming from, the subject, and of course the content of the email. We collect all of that information, put it in an object, and then we use SendGrid to send it. It's that easy. With just 10 lines of code and the SendGrid SDK, we can send email in a snap. So that's our simple little server to both send and receive email. Let's take a look at our Flex plugin next. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to create a Flex plugin yet, getting started is actually extremely easy. You just go out to GitHub and you can find the instructions. So you would just do, there's a CLI command that will generate most of the code that you need to get started. And then you just install your repositories, and the rest of the repo will give you the instructions you need to build. So For ours, we've got our little inject, this is boilerplate code. And then we go into the base file, which is where our Flex plugin resides. And this is all generated code as well, but we put most of our custom code inside of our init function. So inside of our init function, we want to do a couple of things. We want to create our task channel. So in this particular use case, we're creating an email task channel, and then we want to tell Flex how to display information from that channel to the users. So we say, the task list item first line, the title, first line, second line for the canvas, so on and so forth. And we can also do things like creating a custom icon for use, and then we can manipulate things like the task canvas itself. So in this particular case, I'm adding a task canvas in order to display the email information and allow the user to reply to it. In that component, we do a couple of things. We just have our standard React component. It manages a little bit of its state just so that we can update the response that we want to send. But first and foremost, we have to display the email to the user. In order to do this, we set the email content using this right here, and then we just set the message that we received in our Twilio task attributes. Now you'll notice this is wrapped in a root tag. What that is shadow DOM. So we're using a library called React Shade in order to encapsulate the email so that any CSS inside of the email that we get from whichever client is sending it to us doesn't bleed into the rest of our application. One of the other things that we've got set up here is our text area, which has the ability to send a response, and we'll use the send response handler right here, which will call our response function right here. So our response function is going to talk to our server, get the information that it needs in order to send a response. You'll see from the task I'm getting the from attribute that we set when we created it. I'm setting a generic from address, just a no reply at demo.com. And then we want to pull in the subject and just prepend a reply to it. So, and then we put our response in. Now you'll notice here that we're also going to send some an authorization header. For this header, we want to use the standard bearer token. So the JSON web token that's stored within this manager object is our JWT. That's how we know that the user that's making this call is authenticated. Inside of every Twilio object, you have this one right here. You have the ability to send the manager and the task details. So the task details will automatically go to this component, our email task canvas. But we also want to send the manager, which is available here. Now you could also send Flex, but we really don't need Flex for this particular use case, because the manager provides us with the user object, which of course has the token inside of it, which we need. And then after we've sent the message, we're going to reset the state to empty, and we'll call the tasks complete function in order to get it out of our queue. All right, so that's the basics of our Twilio plugins. So let's take a look and actually do our demo now. All right, so first let's get our server started up. For this particular demo, I've decided to use AWS as micro instance because it's free. So let's log into that server. So I'm just going to SSH to my Amazon AWS server. And then let's go to our project folder. All right, so we've got our project files in here, and I've just used git clone to pull the project in. But I do want to show you a couple of other files that are in here just for your knowledge. So one of the crucial files that you'll need to create should you make a clone of this repository is the .env file. This file has all of the keys that I've been using that I got from Twilio, from SendGrid, that I don't want included in my code. So these aren't going to be in GitHub, and this file is not going to be checked in or anything like that. But they are going to be something that you'll need to set for your server to function properly. So you'll see up top here, we've got things like the SendGrid API key, or for Twilio, we need the account SID and the auth token, right? And all of those aren't going to be in my code, but you'll be able to find those keys out in the various consoles fairly easily. All right, so let's get our server started. So I'm going to use sudo in this particular case because we need access to port 25 in order to accept email traffic. And then we'll use port 443 since we're already using sudo. So we'll start up our server, and then you'll see we're listening on port 25 and port 443. At this point in time, we can actually start sending mail to it. So let's do that. So I'm just going to go to Gmail here. I'm going to compose an email. And I'm going to send it to mailserver@joematachik.com. And actually, we can test our server to make sure it's running just by going to mailserver@joe.com. If the mail server weren't running, we wouldn't see anything. We can actually test that real quick. Server's no longer running. Now if we hit refresh, it'll say, nope, can't be reached. Turn it back on. Hey, we're back. So we know our server's running. That's an important step usually. All right, so let's send a test email. All right, sending. All right, so if we go back to our server, we should be able to see the SMTP traffic come in a few seconds. 2, 1, there it is. And going through this, we can see it processed the email. We can see all the debug stuff that it's saying. We can see the parsed email with, as a JSON object. And then we can see that it closed the connection. And then finally, last but not least, it created our Twilio task. So at this point, if we go back in to Flex, we can see our task. We can see test email, hello. Let's claim that task. Well, hello to you as well. Let's tell them. And we'll send that. And I have my console up here just to make sure that the message gets sent. And you can see that the task closed, and we're just waiting for new tasks to come in. If we go back to our server, we can actually see that the API call was made. So send email, we can see where it wanted to send it from. We can see the authorization bearer token that was used to validate the user. And then we can see the email that we wanted to send back. If we go to our email, you'll see we've got an email from no reply. Well, hello to you too as well. Well, hello to you as well. All right. So one of the last things that I want to show you is that one of the reasons that we use SendGrid is because it provides us with a way to determine deliverability and whether or not users actually open the email. So this can be really important because using something like Node Mailer, for example, to send mail, which you can do to send mail via a web application, but you won't guarantee that that mail is going to be delivered, and you're going to be putting your domain name at risk. So if I would have started sending mail from joematachik.com, I could have gotten my email address added to a blacklist, which I don't necessarily want to have happen. By using SendGrid, we can avoid stuff like that. So I'm just going to do a search to see if we can find some of our more recent sends. Loading your results. Bazinga. All right, so that one was sent at about 10:20 UTC. That sounds about right. Let's take a look at the details. Look at that, no reply demo, test email. We can see that it was received and delivered by, and it was received by cleanshooter@gmail.com. So that's always nice to know. And so far my reputation is great. Look at that, 100%. So what I've demonstrated for you right here today is that with just a little bit of code, you can not only stand up your own Node.js server to do email receipt, but you can also send email with SendGrid and manage all of that stuff right inside of Twilio Flex, adding yet another channel to an already great application.